So next I want to show you how to get started with your next on-chip assignment. So you're going to do structure design for already existing subsystems. So we're going to go to the structure design assignment. You're not going to edit directly in here. What you're going to do is go to the hamburger menu up top and then copy this workspace. And then I want you to add your name right in the title here. And it's going to create a new document for you that's just going to be yours to edit. So this is what you're going to submit for your assignment. All right, so now that the new document has been created with my name, you could see if I go back to the week assignments folder, it's created a whole new document for me there. So this is the one that I'm editing. So from here, sometimes you'll either have like different designers working on different subsystems and you need to find a way to connect them, or maybe you download a file from like a pre-built robot that you want to use like a component of it and you want to figure out how to integrate it with your robot. So you create an assembly and then you kind of place it where you want it to be, but you need to figure out how the two things are going to connect now. We'll go over assemblies later in the course, but for now, let's say we have these two assemblies that we know we want to put together, but we need to create a part or a set of parts that does that. So at this assembly, we're going to do what's called an in-context part studio. So this assembly has two things that I want to connect together, and now I want to use the parts of this assembly as contacts or references for my new sketch, or my new parts. So in search tools, I'm going to look for something called in-context part studio. So I'm just putting in context and in the search, create a new in-context part studio. It's going to ask me where I want to put my new part studio origin. I'm going to put it in the same origin as the assembly. And then you'll see it pops up with a new tab for a part studio. It's good practice to rename these things to something descriptive. So I'm going to say this is kit bot in context. So that's the name of my new part studio. And now with the regular part studio, you start with a blank set of datums. So you have like front, right, top, and that's kind of it with the new part studio. With the in-context part studio, now I have all the sections of my assembly, and what that does is it allows me to use like this face as a reference that I want to sketch to. So if I want to design a tube that goes from here down so I can figure out how I want to connect this with a gusset, I can create a new sketch, and my sketch plane is actually going to be that face there, so this face of this context. Now what I can do is I can create a center point rectangle, and then I'll just drop it in space here. We should have learned how to do a concentric circle, so I'm doing a circle in concentric to this mounting hole here, and I'll go ahead and make that equal with an equality constraint to turn that black. And then here I'm going to use a vertical constraint to say I want the center of my tube to be at the center of that hole. I can also make this 1 inch. 1 by 1 inch square is a pretty common tube size that we use. And I want to dimension. There you go. So what was happening before while I was turning red is as I was dragging this, it was locking in another constraint that I didn't want it to. So when it turns orange like that, that generally means it's gonna force a constraint on your part, which in this case I don't want. So I want to make sure that as I'm dragging this, I'm going to a location where it's not like giving me that orange highlight. I know for tubes, I generally have a 1/2 inch spacing from the end of the tube to the first hole. And then it's also kind of easier to work with hole number holes. So if I make this 12 inches, you can see that it is above the part. It's not conflicting with anything. And so I can use that length to extrude 1 inch to make my tube. I'm making sure it's going in the right direction. So it's not going into the plate, it's going out of the plate. So I can create a tube there. And then I could use the same thing, the same tool I used before, the hole pattern or tube converter. And it makes that into a tube for me. And now I can create a gusset that goes from here to here. So like using like the maybe bottom 4 or 5 holes from here, and then maybe the side holes right here. I can draw a gusset that connects all this together. So that's an example of using in context Part Studio.